Black and Azul now in our 29th episode here in our studio. Do apologize about the technical difficulties, and I appreciate you guys letting us know about the sound problems as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten it done. Back with our wonderful team here, Joel Soria, Alex Morgan. My name is Charles Wollin. Jamon Moore will be joining us in a little bit. We're going to start again with the top of the program and the big news this evening. The Quakes lose in Salt Lake, succumbing to a goal in the 75th minute. But the biggest talking point from this game was Nick Raimondo potentially could have been sent off in this game. A ball sent in over the top. He comes out outside the 18. Looks like he handles the ball, and for a goalkeeper to do that usually results in a red card and sending off of the goalkeeper. So where's the accountability here? Should it have been reviewed? I know there's some frustrated people out there. Was justice done, or what should have not been reviewed, and why wasn't it? Eager to hear your comments. Joel, what do you make?
You know, Nick Raimondo played hot potato with the ball outside of the box. It was a blatant, reviewable call. I think that would have resulted in a penalty. But just like I said earlier in the show, you know, the longer that pro referees remains, you know, the officiating entity in MLS, you know, the more blows the league's legitimacy is going to take, which is already pretty thin. And thin, by thin I mean domestically. I don't think, you know, the world really has their eyes on the league all that much, you know, with all due respect. But this is getting out of hand. You know, we're talking about multiple times in a match week. We're talking about it poor officiating happening simultaneously. Tonight it happened in Salt Lake, in Sandy, Utah to be exact, and it also happened in Colorado between the Galaxy and the Rapids. I'm sure if you guys been keeping tabs on the Quakes rivals, you guys were paying attention to that game. And it happened there as well in the late stages of the match. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. You know, they're having too much influence on the results, and obviously the reason why Matias Almeida, you know, wasn't present on the touchline today was because of that. Was because of him, you know, standing up against poor officiating, and you know, today the Quakes, you know, were robbed.
This is why. These calls are why San Jose have been frustrated with the officiating these last couple months. It's because of the discrepancies in how VAR is being implemented across the league. Look, I don't know if it should have been a penalty or not. I would have had to have looked at the replay more closely, but I think absolutely it should have been called back to VAR. And the fact that it doesn't, you know, sort of signals that, well, you know, you see some of the other teams in Major League Soccer getting these calls, going to VAR, San Jose and other teams not. The discrepancy is in how it's being used is what's frustrating them. And look, we you know, clearly Matias Almeida is frustrated. That's why he's serving his three-match suspension.
Imagine what would have happened today.
He let his frustrations.
If he was there.
Yeah, seriously.
One can only imagine.
And Chris Wondolowski as well. Last week after the Orlando game, he started to sort of criticize the referees, but then bit his tongue at the last minute. You can sense in this locker room a growing frustration with the way that VAR is being implemented.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of teams and plenty of you know, top tier players. I mean, Zlatan was one of them. He was going completely after the officials in charge. And like I was saying earlier in the show as well, it's not about the tool. It's about the people behind the tool, the ones who are really pulling the strings here, and those are the officials who are employed by the league, you know, and they have to, you know, quote unquote, be competent enough to be able to, you know, orchestrate, you know, what they do for a living, and you know, sadly enough, they don't do it well. And that's keeping in mind. Also, we have to keep in mind that the league, MLS, was one of the first leagues to implement VAR worldwide, if not the first one. I can't think of that at the top of my head. Maybe you guys can help me out there, but they were one of the first. I mean, we're talking about Premier League, you know, and the Premier League implementing it just about a year ago.
And I think it adds extra pressure that the English Premier League has instituted VAR. I think it's going to be a very, I mean, as you can see, it's already quite controversial in the English League already. Stoppages of play, fans chanting, expletive VAR over and over and over again, and kind of ruining the play. Look, VAR is good for the game, but it's going to have its growing pains, and this is a huge issue. This is a huge issue, and you're going to go back to this, and you're going to say, okay, well, so the Quakes should have gotten the penalty in LA? Should have gotten Armando sent off and then the extra player up? For the last 10 minutes and look back on this season's potentially in playoff positioning. These are huge things.
VAR is not the problem. The problem is the people in charge, the people with power, because us as humans, we make mistakes. VAR doesn't.
We clearly have tonight with the tech on the show.
But we're here now, and we appreciate everybody for tuning in. You guys make this show. Juan Carlos Cardenas, Ren 1018, been there since earlier this evening. Hoovy Games, appreciate your guys' perspective. Frank, appreciate your perspective. And Emilio Aguilar, keep commenting, keep asking us questions. But let's just talk about the game itself. Lots of international players missing on both sides here. Judson withdrawn in the 65th minute. A little bit questionable there as well. And not totally, good performances by the Quakes. Some, suboptimal, I would say. But what do you think of kind of the changes coupled with these international breaks?
I think it was pretty suboptimal all around for the Quakes. They had 6 or 7 players playing over the international break. A couple of them came back tonight and were able to get minutes on the pitch. Vaco came on as a sub, and Nkashia was able to start at the back. But then there are also some changes that surprised us. I don't think a lot of people were expecting Paul Marie to start at left back. We talked about on our show last week the projected starting lineup, and Paul Marie was not a guy we were expecting. He hadn't been in the squad for the Quakes recently. We were expecting Shea Salinas at left back or in left mid. And to me, it's a bit surprising why Shea Salinas didn't start in this kind of game. It seems like him player knowing how to get the job done as opposed to Marie, who might, at this stage of the season when the Quakes really need results, be a bit more of a gamble. Also, you have Carlos Fierro playing up top on the left, and I think we have to be disappointed in his performance again. We talked about it earlier, how we weren't sure whether he was ready to go full 90, whether he was ready to start for this team, and I don't think he made a really good case for himself tonight.
Not at all. I think we made it pretty clear, or at least I tried making it very clear, that Carlos Fierro wasn't going to be a game-changing player. He's a player that honestly has been struggling a lot in Mexico prior to his arrival. He's a player that's been trying to, find that form that he once had as a 17-year-old. He's now 25. That's a lot of time, and for a player like him to not have, regular positive playing time since his time with Almeida in 2016, 2017, I mean, that's 2 years as well. So for him, he had a clear chance at goal, or a clear run when Christian Espinosa and Magnus Eriksson combined perfectly. Espinosa made a brilliant first-time touch, set himself up with the run, was obviously going to outpace the majority of the RSL defenders, puts the ball right in front of Carlos, and all he has to do is, outrun his defender and outrun Raimondo, who was coming off of his line, and he just couldn't get there. He didn't have enough in the tank. He didn't have enough power in his legs. He just did not get there. I thought it was a pretty obvious chance. But he didn't even touch the ball.
Look, in a lot of the highlight reels we watched from Carlos Fierro when he was first signed were exactly the situations of him running in behind, getting around the keeper, and putting the ball in the back of the net. But tonight he just seemed, and really all this season for the Quakes, he seemed just like a step off the pace and not be able to do it. And that's, the reason why the Quakes didn't have enough penetration going forward tonight. You look back 2 weeks ago against Vancouver, they had 43 shots. Another 20 against Orlando in their last match. This match was the opposite. They only had 9 shots. And they just really didn't show up top. Look, it's also partly because RSL, we were talking about this with our colleague Jamon Moore. He has some charts up on Twitter that I'd highly recommend you looking at that illustrate this point. RSL are really good at stopping teams on the counterattack, and that's what they did tonight. They shut down Espinosa, and without Vaca or Yule to add sort of that extra bit of dynamism on the break, the Quakes lacked penetration. And the best shot the Quakes had was probably Palmieri getting forward down the left in a volley, and that's from across from the right from Espinosa. But other than that, I struggle to think of good chances the Quakes have had.
I wanted to echo off, you bringing up Vaco. I think Vaco's absence was fundamental in the Quakes not walking away with points. Mm-hmm. The way that I was able to weigh that was through Magnus Eriksson, because I think Magnus Eriksson today looked plain. He looked really pedestrian. He was standard, subpar, whatever you want to call it. And I think a lot of that had to do with Vaco just not being on that left side, pinching inwards and transmitting that energy that he's been doing so for the last couple of months. I think that was the big letdown offensively. Defensively, obviously not having Nick, despite him not playing the best with the Quakes this season. We'll get to his performance against Uruguay a couple days ago, yesterday, But yeah, I think Vaco's absence, for the majority of the game played a huge role in the Quakes not walking away with at least a point.
And actually, I think when Vaco did come on towards the very latter stages of the match, I think he was the last sub that San Jose had. The Quakes looked better, and they had more chances going forward. There was a spark. But then my mind sort of turns to, the Quakes are missing a lot of players. They don't have much going forward. Was the game mismanaged? Should they have been a little more prudent and a little more defensive? You look at in the second half, tied 0-0 on the road with the Western Conference, as tight as it is. They really went. I was going to say Matias Almeida, but Matias Almeida wasn't on the sideline. It was his assistants. Really went for the 3 points. They brought on Andy Rios for Judson, made 3 attacking subs. And it was, at that point that decision, that gamble really flipped on them, and it didn't pay off. It backfired. RSL, when Judson came off, went right back down the other end, won a dangerous free kick. And then, eventually they keep putting on the pressure, and Krylik puts in a goal that seals the 3 points. And I think
by the way,
that didn't work for the Quakes.
A bit embarrassing there for Godoy to not even jump and make the effort to contest that ball in the air that Krylik ended up winning and put it in the back of the net. I just think we did not see a formidable Godoy tonight, mm-hmm. and I think that really just follows a narrative that he's been writing.
Seen a formidable Godoy all season.
Right. I mean, he's on his way out, so.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the kind of the central midfield fulcrum without Jackson and Judson combining together, and then Judson being subbed off, is a really big detriment to this team. When he's on the field, he opens the space up for so many other players. I mean, he just tracks down the ball, wins back the ball, and then is able to distribute accordingly. And he gets the play to be faster every single time when he's on the ball. Quick passing, lateral passing, small little passes in between him and the back line and to the outside backs as well. And so Alex, I agree with your point and the fact that I wasn't sure if some of the changes could have or should have happened. And then at the same time, you have to think to yourself, okay, yeah, I want to get the win on the road. But against Salt Lake, a team that's decent in possession, didn't have the majority of the possession, and is good in tight games, and is on a roll. At home, I might agree with you. Keep Judson on the field, and maybe get Andy Rios on the field and keep Wando
for Magnus.
Yeah, for Magnus, exactly. And to your point about Vaco, Vaco and Cristian Espinosa have clearly stamped their marks as some of the best wingers in this league, and they make this team really go. And they're key to Matias Almeida's system, and so. When we talk about Carlos Fierro, he's been brought in to be a bit part player. He's not been brought in to be a starter. I know a lot of people would like him to be a starter.
The way that he
but
was
he needs more
advertised,
games.
though.
He needs more games. He needs games, and so does Paul Marie. They both need more games, but he sticks with his main core, his main guys, and Carlos Fierro needs games. He needs more games, and unfortunately, we haven't seen the best of him. He's in a slump, but at the same time, Matias Almeida has him now. He took a few months to implement his system in San Jose, and Carlos Fierro is going to be that guy that's still behind Espinosa and Vaco.
Here's the thing.
Here's where Alex was saying Salinas probably should have started tonight or had a little bit of time.
I would have elected Shea over Fierro on the left side, personally. I would have gone with that. I think there's two ways of observing a player, and one of them is obviously through their physical, play, and the other is looking at their mental status, and I rate that, and I weigh that through the confidence that they exude when they're on the field. I've been keeping a close eye on Fierro because it's a lot easier to keep track of him given the fact that he hasn't had much playing time. On the field, he doesn't look confident at all. He falls to the ground very quickly. In fact, a couple of games ago at home, I don't think it was against Orlando, but he had that clear pass and a defender did tug him a little bit and he decided to fall. But looking back at that play, he could have easily just, shoved him off, ran with the ball, and he was inside the 6-yard box.
And he had moments of that tonight. He had moments of that where he was able to muscle players off. But then, as you say, there were too many moments where he gives up on a ball too early and doesn't really, put in that extra 110%.
So I relate that to his mental fortitude.
Absolutely.
And I would like to sit down and talk to him to really, be able to tell it from his perspective. But to me, objectively, that's what I see.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're lacking confidence, you need practice time, you need games, you need time. And you're correct with the mental fortitude. I also observe the same kind of behavior of him on the field. And how much do you push a guy, and how much do you kind of do what you're saying, sit him down and chat with him and kind of
maybe he's not really acclimating to life in California and life in the U.S. Maybe there's something missing. I don't know. It's something that needs to be brought up because, despite him not really having the best track record, before coming into San Jose, there's something lacking there, and I don't know if it's time to worry, but it's a little iffy.
And look, it's concerning considering now the situation the Quakes are in. They're going away to New York City FC, currently top of the Eastern Conference. They've catapulted themselves up the Eastern Conference table to the home of the Yankees. But they are actually now 6 unbeaten, I think, at Yankee Stadium.
At a baseball-specific field. It's great.
This is very true, but if the Quakes don't make the playoffs, I don't think New York will be complaining. Look, I think it's I think it's a match that now the Quakes really have to go take a point from. Looking at how tight this Western Conference is, I think the only silver lining tonight might be the fact that the Quakes had other great results from around the league. Houston, I think it was, getting a win over Minnesota, and then Colorado obviously beating the LA Galaxy. That's taking 6 points off of some of San Jose's closest competitors. That might give the Quakes a little bit more margin of error, but they really have to go into this match against New York City, against a really hot team, and try to get something out of it or risk a road trip coming away with 0 points at the most crucial stage of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been foreshadowing this for some time now. The Quakes were going to have a really tough schedule, and it's living up to the hype. I mean, it's tough. RSL seemed to be, on paper, like one of the easier opponents out of this really difficult bunch. But yeah, looking next to this game against New York City FC, the Quakes aren't going to have Marco Ureña. You guys remember that? The last time they played at Yankee Stadium, he scored. So they're going to have to call him up. I think he's in Costa Rica now. But no, in all seriousness, NYCFC has really picked it up, tremendously these last couple of months, and they're fighting for that number one spot in the East. It's not going to be easy, and given the fact that the Quakes are starting to really slow down on the road, it's not looking great, and they're not favorites at all.
They are 9-1-5 at home, NYCFC, and in the last 10 matches, 7 wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie for this for this NYCFC team. And Alex is pulling up the 538 projections
I wanna hear this.
for the playoffs.
What are the percentages?
But they've got a really
I actually don't think the percentage have updated as of tonight's result.
Okay.
It's
It was
still
at
saying 74%. I
74?
think it was American Soccer Analysis. Our colleague Jamon had at 79%.
Okay.
But I can't imagine they've improved after tonight. I think I'll hand it over to Jamon at that point, and he can talk more about the probabilities and the statistics that the Quakes have looking forward for the playoff run this season.
Absolutely. And for NYCFC, again, top of the Eastern Conference so far, 15 wins, 9 draws, 5 losses, and it really is their home record, Joel, that's really kind of catapulting them there. Philadelphia behind them on 51 points. They are on 54 points. And then 6 points behind Atlanta United with a game in hand,
Right.
Granted, the current MLS champions. But, this Eastern Conference team that's going to get this first round bye in the playoffs, I think, is going to have a nice little cushion here. I mean, this first round bye is no gimme, folks. It really isn't. LAFC has obviously got this first round bye by a mile in the West. But in the East, it's still up for grabs. And I don't think people really kind of say to themselves or really think to themselves, you know what, this Eastern Conference first spot is really the real deal. It is the real deal.
Right. No, and it's something that's going to really fuel New York, right? The fact that they're right there, neck and neck with Philadelphia to get that number one spot. They're going to go out and they're going to play their best against the Quakes, especially being at home. NYCFC today played against Toronto FC. They drew 1-1. They didn't have Maxi Morales. Now, we're going to have to keep an eye on and see if Maxi Morales is going to be able to go against the Quakes. Also, they don't have one of their most influential players, especially in the attack, Heber, as my colleague Jamon Moore corrected me. He's injured. He's out for the rest of the season. So in that sense, the Quakes do have some leeway, but like I said, it's going to be a really, really tough task, and especially given the fact that the Quakes are just not performing on the road. You talked about winning at home. They've done that, and I think that's what's going to get them in the playoffs ultimately. But the road performances are highly questionable, and if they keep slipping away from home, they're going to have to play on the road if they do make playoffs. And that, I mean, with what they're showing away from Avaya Stadium, it's not looking good. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to best that 2017 performance in Vancouver.
Yeah, the Quakes having a really difficult time, picking up points here on the road. And, with that being said, though, Matias Almeida coming back with his team for this final little stretch, but it's no little stretch. It's a big stretch. And welcome back to the show, Jamon Moore. And we're going to talk a little playoff probabilities and what's your take here on NYCFC?
Yeah, I mean, NYCFC is, I think, to me, that they are really the cream of the crop of the East, particularly when they're healthy. And as Joel mentioned, they're not really healthy right now. So the Quakes may not get the full force of what they're capable of doing. But they've been able to, under Domi Torrent, they've really been able to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit in the style of a Pep Guardiola, if Pep Guardiola wanted to play a bit more direct given the confines of a place like Yankee Stadium. And they're very pragmatic, is the way I would say. It's not just hold on to the ball for the ball's sake, but they look for those incisive opportunities. They like to use the half spaces. They like to get the ball. Very precise. They like to get the ball, and they don't have a lot of room for error, right? And so they like to get the ball into Heber, however you want to say it. Extra Time had a nice little debate about that this week. But obviously he's not healthy. Maxi Morales may or may not be. It'll be an interesting game for the Quakes. You just can't take NYCFC, even without those two stars, for granted. There's still a lot of power within that team. And Dome now knows how to switch things around in order to account for people who haven't been there. Remember, they were a pretty good team even mid-season before they had made those acquisitions that have made them stronger since. And they were fine before that. Got a lot of draws, but a lot of those were on the road. And they've been a strong team for the vast majority of the season. And they've got playoff experience. They know how to play, in some pretty high-pressure situations.
So, Quakes taking on NYCFC this Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific.
That's also going to play a factor.
Yeah, 9 a.m. Pacific. So if you're waking up at that time, turn the TV on. You've got that. And I'm just going to say something because I am. Matt Wyke, who visited us on our, I think, third or fourth show, he is in charge of the Quakes fan chapter Misplaced 74 out in New York, and he is a Quakes diehard fan. I think some of you see him online, but he's hosting some sort of party, some sort of tailgate, whatever. I'm just kind of sending him some good vibes.
And if you're there, contact him.
Yeah, if you're there, contact him. Matt Wyke on Twitter. The last name is spelled W-Y-K-E. As well. Let's quickly just wrap up on the Western Conference and then get into national team stuff, and then we're going to take your Q&A, and I've already seen some good questions in there here. But guys, LA Galaxy is out of the playoff picture as of this evening. They are out of the playoff picture as of this evening. Sporting KC, they're just kind of getting their foothold back into this playoff picture. They're 5 points off LA Galaxy. But with the Galaxy out of the playoff picture and Sporting KC trying to get this foothold, again, this race for the playoffs is anyone's game, and there's going to be two good teams here, possibly even three, with Colorado winning tonight again, because Colorado just keeps winning. There's going to be some teams that are going to be left out, and if the Quakes, don't pick up some points here, it's going to be a rough offseason if they don't make it.
Yeah, the Galaxy aren't completely done.
No,
but this was definitely a game that they needed.
As it current stands is what I mean.
Currently stands, they're out right now. Their probability coming in was still 82%.
I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, FC Dallas actually has a bit of a lower probability than LA Galaxy coming into the week. SKC only at 5%, so I think there's they're likely done unless just some miracles happen for them. The thing that you really got to look at in terms of the way that things are going to play out at this point is really look at Minnesota. Minnesota has the schedule which is considered to be tougher than the Quakes. They took advantage of a Carlos Vela-less LAFC, were able to get 3 points they should not have gotten, but then they went out and laid a stinker tonight against Houston.
You're not very big on Minnesota.
No, I'm not very big on Minnesota. Why? There's a good reason. I put out a tweet about this before, but they do not play in winning game states. They don't. Neither does Seattle. They don't play in winning game states. They play in losing game states. They play in a lot of draws, and they get a little bit lucky at the end of the game. They're good in moments. They're a moment team. They do not have a style that is a winning style like the Quakes do have.
Fair enough.
And the Quakes are going to need to... They found that form. They found that style in the two home games. As was mentioned tonight, I think by Alex, 9 shots, right? That is not their style. They were not putting balls on frame when they had the opportunity. They were going away from it. They were making additional passes, and then the attack would fall apart. They have to be more aggressive. They have to play their game. They have to keep the pressure on, keep the shots coming, keep New York City FC on their back heels and Atlanta as well on the road. Both of those teams, if you put the pressure on them, if you pin them back, they are not good at playing out. Anyone remember when you mentioned Marco Urania getting that goal, NYCFC? Why? Because the Quakes pinned Sean Johnson back.
Yeah, I remember that.
He cannot play out of the back very well. Quakes have to take advantage of this. Okay, you've got a goalkeeper there that cannot play out of the back very well. You've got some players in Atlanta United that are kind of like up and down, not quite sure, what they're going to be on any given day. That pressure has to stay up. So yes, I don't like Minnesota because I don't like their schedule. I don't like their style of play. I still don't like Seattle overall, just because they got a gutted out win against Portland means nothing to me, because neither one of those teams plays with a distinct style. RSL, I think, is a team to be kind of afraid of. I think RSL's got a very good chance of being number 2 or number 3 in the West right now.
Well, they're
I think
two
they're
right
going to
now,
get a home
yeah.
game. I think they're going to get a home game because they know how to play. They know how to shut teams down. They know how to play a defensive game. They've controlled the Quakes very well on 2 different games and really contained them extremely well. RSL's the real deal. And the West needs to wake up to that.
Look, I think the Quakes have just really humbled themselves this season, which really aligns with, Almeida's aura, right? His mantra and that Bushido code that he hasn't brought up in about like 6 or 7 months. But, at times they don't give themselves enough credit. At least I think so. They're in the playoff race, and they've been in the playoff race for a number of months now. But, you hear it here and there, Matias Almeida saying, well, if we went this far, that's okay. We weren't planning on making playoffs. Like that wasn't our objective. Well, you've been there, and you should be, what they should be worried about, or what they should be aiming for, is that number 2 spot, because they're not playing well on the road. And I will keep making this very clear. I don't know what it's going to take for this team to just really flip that switch when they're away from Avaya Stadium, but that it's something that they've systematically have dealt with for a number of years. It doesn't matter if it's Chris Leach, or if it was Dom Kinnear or Ralston, Mikel Stare, or even Almeida himself. They cannot be consistent on the road. That identity that the team has really, really built themselves on has not been able to carry on when they step on a plane, when they land in a foreign city. It's got to change, because, now more than ever, I think the player needs to realize that a lot is on the line. That despite what their vision was, day one, they're now in it, and they need to go for that second spot, because I personally don't think they'll go very far if they start off on the road in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's a battle of attrition in the West. It's going to be, who's left standing. There are going to be a lot of tough losses for teams, and it's going to be gut check time, and we're going to find out, who's made of what in the Western Conference.
And remember, these are all one-off games. This is not double-legged like you're used to seeing. These are all one-off games. So
tell LAFC that.
You win, you stay on, you lose, goodbye, see you next year. Let's transition and talk a little bit about the national team implications that the Quakes were involved in this week. The 2 Georgian players, Vako with an assist, Kasia playing all 90 minutes.
Harold Cummings
with an interesting
losing to the mighty Bermuda.
Own goal, right? And then let's chat about the U.S. and let's start there. Jackson Yueill getting the start against Uruguay, and then Nick Lima coming off of the bench, providing an assist for a goal as well. I think Jackson, as I said on this show, again, offers something different in a central midfield position. For the Quakes, he plays in a number 8 spot, the box-to-box role, but for the men's national team, played number 6 spot. And, you could see him in the beginning of the game for the U.S. trying to get on the ball and then trying to tell the center backs, Aaron Long, to switch the ball quicker. And you could see him kind of orchestrating. And so, granted, I think Jackson had a good performance. And the U.S. team, say what you will, there's a lot of opinion about the U.S. team, and we can certainly divulge. But nevertheless, Jackson Yueill in the starting 11 against Uruguay for the United States national team as a 6, as a defensive midfield player. Very different than his Quakes football. But again, he's there doing his thing. And then Nick Lima comes off the bench and does what he does best: energy, pace, and of course, he's got plenty of skill down that right side.
Jackson Yueill is in a fantastic situation. He is going to be playing some of the most meaningful soccer of any Quakes player in this offseason, one way or the other. He's either going to get the opportunity to continue to play Nations League and thereby catapult himself potentially into being in World Cup qualifiers, or he's going to have the opportunity to finally get the U.S. back to the Olympics for the first time in 12 years. Either way, meaningful soccer for Jackson Yueill. This is a big offseason for him. This is a big year of his career in terms of its transition and its meaning for him going forward. I can't be more excited for Jackson. Nick, on the other hand, is at a different crossroads. So Nick is a bit older now. He's had some national team opportunities. I thought overall he's taken advantage of those opportunities, but Reggie Cannon has showed a bit more.
Yeah.
Not only that, but it depends on what you think Tyler Boyd is supposed to be. Is he supposed to be a 6? Is he supposed to be the right back? As well as, what are you going to do with the other right backs that weren't called into camp this time because of injuries and whatnot, right? And that includes DeAndre Yedlin. So Nick Lima is at a crossroads, and I don't think that Greg Berhalter quite knows what to do, because he knows that for the most part Nick's done a pretty good job with his opportunities. He has an assist in this game, the ugliest assist you'll ever see, but he created something. He was aggressive. He kept going after the ball, and it just happened to ricochet in his favor. Most of the times those balls seem to not ricochet in your favor. This time it did. Good for him. I'm just afraid with Serginho Dest coming in, and once those injuries are resolved themselves, I'm just afraid that Nick Lima is going to be on the outside looking in. I wrote about Nick. If you haven't seen it yet, Quakes Epicenter. Still a good read, I think. Give you some insight into what Nick's looking at here, the type of uphill battle he's facing. He's very game for it. I thought he came ready to play for his 15 minutes.
Always, that has been his mentality.
But unfortunately, I don't know how much is left in the national team for Nick Lima. I think we got two players at a big crossroads right now.
That's exactly what I was going to say, and I'll just piggyback off you, Jamon. His days are numbered, and that's only if the current situation with the Quakes continues on the same path. We've been able to tell that Nick under Almeida has not been that same Nick that we saw in 2018. But going a little bit on going back to Jackson Yueill, what about some good low-hanging fruit for Greg Berhalter there? He's gotten a lot of credit for Jackson Yueill on the national team, and I think it all falls back on Almeida. Almeida is really the one who's crafted Jackson Yueill to what he is today, I believe, because previous to Almeida, under Starre and under Ralston. Yes, under Ralston, he did get a lot of playing time because he was trying to emphasize, giving minutes, handing minutes to the Quakes youth. But Almeida's really the one who's brought out this different Jackson that wasn't known. And I'm just not really in favor of Greg Berhalter getting a whole lot of applause for Jackson Yueill being on the men's national team, and if anything, I think he's mismanaged them, and he showed it right away.
Yeah, he
didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah,
and that goes to show the difference in quality of coaches.
I think Jackson Yueill forces coaches to think about, what am I going to do with a guy with decent defensive skills, improving defensive skills, I would say, but I want that traditional number 6. Is he a regista? Is he some sort of special system type player? He definitely made Uruguay have to account for him, as Matt Doyle pointed out, right? And they had to shift things around just to account for the way that Jackson Yueill was playing balls and spraying things out. He's a different type of player. You have to think about, what is it that you want him to be? I don't think he's your ball-winning defensive midfielder type 6 that they're going to want in the system. If he plays, I think he's in a double pivot, sitting beside someone else who's going to perform the defensive duties. He's not a Will Trapp. He's not a Michael Bradley even.
No,
and
no,
so-
He's a
far
Jackson
from
Mule.
it.
He's a
far
Jackson
from
Mule.
it. He's
And that's-
himself,
He's
right?
himself, and
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that I think that you haven't seen a player like this in quite some time in the
Well, it's because
American
he's white,
central midfield.
He's white, but he has a Latin flavor to him.
Absolutely,
That's
I would
what
agree
it
with
is.
that.
Yeah, he's
That's
got a
what
flair.
it is.
He's
I
got
would
a
agree
flair,
with that.
and he plays a ball that. How many people have you seen, at least in MLS, be able to play a ball where effectively it's like a half volley? He's done this like 3 times this season. He plays like a half volley into space for a dying ball that lands right in front of a sprinting winger.
Yeah.
Who does that in MLS? Name somebody, because I don't know who it is, and I don't think anyone else has seen it either, not in this league. So yeah, he's a different type of player, and I think he presents Greg Berhalter with an interesting challenge.
Well, I'm going to push it on him as well. Jackson, if you're watching this, go to Europe. That's all I got to say. Go to Europe.
He reminds me of a young Steven Gerrard, actually, to be honest, because Stevie G could never really play in the holding role, but also loved playing as a number 10, but also was just so much more effective playing in that 8 box-to-box position.
Yeah, dropping back and getting on the
And it
ball.
comes back to it. In the beginning, in the first 5 minutes, Jackson Ewell was just pointing to the defenders to switch the ball, switch the play quicker. He's obviously, and as Joel had noted, it is Matias Almeida's present to Greg Berhalter that that Jackson Ewell has these abilities.
With, I think, the media members
yeah.
literally, escorting him to Greg Berhalter and handing him right at his doorstep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is, honestly.
There you go.
So
Let's get to some questions here, because I know you guys have been hanging in, especially after our technical difficulties.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody, for being so patient with us this evening. Alicio Sandoval, you made this comment, you made this question earlier in the show, and we just almost answered it, but I want to come back to it because I have a big opinion on it. With the Quakes not being able to score away, does this make it a more dire situation for us to host a game at Avaya?
yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I've been getting this point across the entire show.
Yeah.
I want to hear what you have to say, Jamon, because I've made it very clear. The Quakes either need to show up on the road, or they're going to suffer their first game into the playoffs in the Almeida era.
What I want to see from NYCFC this weekend is one thing. If they get a result, they don't get a result. What I want to see is a return to the type of game that they played when they went into DC United and really put the pressure on and forced goalkeepers to have to do things with the ball that they're not comfortable doing. That's the opportunity this weekend. If they can do that, they can regain some confidence on the road. I think they're actually a pretty good road team. The road is very difficult in MLS. Very, very difficult.
Here we go.
In MLS. So that is what it is. It's cross-country travel. They're away from home for a week, but it is difficult. And, for whatever the reasons are, I can tell you right now, on American Soccer Analysis Slack, this gets brought up once a month, and people look into it, and you can't find any rhyme, reason, patterns, anything from a data perspective, but it's just the way it is. It's one of the most difficult teams to go on, difficult leagues in the world to go on the road and win in.
I think that's a bit bizarre, and I think it's a little weird sometimes to even have that. I agree with you on that, but
I'm just getting tired of the narrative, to be honest
me
with
too.
you. It gets brought up every other week.
So,
now.
Yeah,
so
it's
if
like, why
they get
can't-
charter flights, is that going to solve the problem?
I think it will. I think it will benefit a lot of teams dramatically. And to be honest with you, a lot of the teams travel 2 days before a game.
I mean, they have to host a game. They have to host a game at Avaya. The reason being, it's a tale of 2 different teams. It's a tale of 2 different teams. They look totally different at Avaya versus on the road.
But we've seen
at
them
Avaya,
play
they
on
are
the
like
road.
titanium.
Well, I
you
think
can't touch them, like except for the Columbus game where they just hoof the ball up and they were able to pack the wide areas, and then but they have to host a game at home. And Joel, you're right, and Alex, you're right. They should be pushing for that second spot, and I'm a little surprised that they're not in that second spot. And then it comes back to this, that MLS is doing its parity thing, and it's just bizarre. Maybe it's just this year in the West, and maybe it's just that all these teams are just the same
East
exact
too.
team. Maybe just there's a really good team in the West and an excellent team, and then there's 7 teams below them. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, maybe MLS is starting to turn into a top 5 European league where you're going to have 1 or 2 teams who are just control. Maybe it's the start of that.
Wait until after the CBA.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Looking for another question here, guys. Would love some more questions from you. Don't see too many as many here.
A lot of good frustration, though.
But a lot of yes, of course.
Thank you for allowing us to be your outlet.
What do you guys make of the altitude situation about this? I was listening to Ted Ramey on the call earlier this evening. He had Marvell Wynn on the with him for the Quakes Soccer Hour, and Marvell Wynn was chatting about his time in Colorado, and then said, despite the altitude, RSL is just this hard place to play, and they have this this song that they sing before the game, and that he was saying from a player perspective, he was a little intimidated.
They have good attendance numbers as well, and despite it being a Wednesday, I think they were still able to fill a lot of seats. Like the thing with the altitude, like the travel and playing on the road, these are narratives that are getting a bit old. We spoke to Matias and we asked him about the altitude just a couple of weeks ago, and he was very blunt. He said, "Look, it's not going to influence us. These are professional players. They train in day out." And of course, here, by the way, I'm paraphrasing, but he said these players are professionals. They're fit. It's only 90 minutes. He said it's only 90 minutes that they're asked for to play at a very, very high physical level. He didn't give it any credit. I mean, I don't know. I think it's getting old. I think he's right. That's the mentality in Mexico. I mean, for instance, these players play at very high elevations. For instance, in South America.
Yeah.
In South America, you have Argentine teams. You have Paraguayan teams who travel to La Paz, Bolivia, that is at over 10,000 feet. And these Argentine teams, and sometimes these Chilean teams, or Chile is also at a very high elevation, but you have like
Ecuador,
Ecuadorian. You have these teams that that play at low surface areas, and they travel to some of the highest cities in the world, and they do well, and they dominate Bolivian teams. So, what's the argument? I don't know.
Well, the results say.
And let's keep in mind, though, too. Sorry, that America's sports science is by far more developed than the South American countries. So where's the excuse? I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't see it.
I don't think there should be an excuse. I mean, you had Fierro play tonight. If anyone's used to Mexican altitudes, it's going to be him, right? And he looked the first one to be gassed out there. So, look, agree. If it was that big of a deal, Colorado would be a juggernaut, but they're not. They haven't been for most of their years, right? So that it's not the biggest factor. It is a factor. I think it's the style that the Quakes play a bit. That they came out guns blazing tonight. I applaud those types of efforts. They did the same thing in Colorado, but they ran out of gas. And that was clear in the second half that they were not the same team. We've talked about this before. It's the tale of two teams. It's a first half team and a second half team. And on the road, it shows way more starkly than at home. And it happened again tonight. The Quakes were a good team in the first half. They were basically playing behind the 8 ball for most of the second half. They didn't have the possession. They didn't control the game. They didn't dictate the terms. They allowed RSL to do that. It showed in the final result. Nothing you can do. You can complain about a referee call. I agree. I think it should have been looked at, but I don't think they deserve to win. Maybe deserved a draw, did not deserve a win.
5 games left for the San Jose Earthquakes. They take on NYC FC on Saturday, 9 a.m. kickoff Pacific time. So make sure that you're getting up and getting your morning coffee or whatever you do, your routine, your ritual, or just turning over, looking at your phone at the game as well. We will be back here next week. And then a special note, we will be doing a live shoot at Avaya Stadium when Philadelphia comes to San Jose on the 25th of September. Just wanted to shout out to everybody that's tuned into our show before we wrap everything up. I do want to give you guys' names because I love it. Frank, thank you for the throwback jersey comment. I agree with you. Ren 1018, you're always there since day one. Quakes fan MLS. Hoovy Games, you have been commenting all evening, and I agree with the majority of your comments. Good ones. Keep those ones going as well. Our guy Eric Santiago. We've got Juan Carlos Cardenas. Appreciate you with all your good questions. As always, Emilio Aguilar, Alicio Sandoval, Jamon Moore, who's sitting right here, who was commenting clearly before, Joel Velez, and Alex Morgan as well. And thank you so much for tuning in. Joel Soria, Jamon Moore, Charles Wollin, our producer.
Come on, Alex.
Daniel Negretti with
down
us today as well, and we will be back
So intimate.
with you next
There's
week.
a reason that 4-man doesn't work in here.
Yeah, episode 30 coming to you next week, and then one quick last shout out to Satish. We will take your question on Twitter and answer it because we are at the end of our show and end of our time. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in. You guys help make this show. You build this show. This is your show. Cheers for helping to grow the game in our country by tuning into our broadcast tonight. You do just that. Cheers. Good night. We'll see you next time.
Good night.